They say Padre Pio walked through storms to reach the souls that needed him. He blessed the dying, held the broken, entered homes filled with sorrow, and even prisons thick with sin. But one day, in a quiet village no one talks about anymore, he stopped. He stood before a church door, motionless, silent, and then turned away. "I will not enter this place," he said. "There is something behind that door that makes the angels weep." And just like that, he walked back into the dust and light, leaving behind a stunned priest, a grieving village, and a sacred mystery that would take years to uncover. What could possibly make a saint walk away from a house of God? Why did Padre Pio feel the need to whisper a blessing to the outside walls of the church, but refuse to step even 1 foot past its threshold? This is not a story of superstition. It is a story of spiritual discernment, and what happens when holiness refuses to share space with something unclean. Word spread faster than any prayer that day. By sunset, every house in the village knew what had happened. Padre Pio had refused to enter the church. Some were outraged, others were confused, but all were shaken. Children were told not to speak of it. Old women clutched their rosaries tighter, and the local priest, the one who had invited Padre Pio, locked himself in the sacristy for hours, pacing between the pews with red eyes and trembling hands. No explanation was given, and yet, no one could stop imagining 1,000 reasons. Some said Padre Pio had sensed a demonic presence. Others whispered of hidden sins in the church's past, a priest who vanished without a trace, a child's cry once heard behind the altar, or the rumor that during the war, the church had been used for something it was never meant for. One woman, who cleaned the floors every week, claimed she had always felt a strange cold near the pulpit. Another swore that the Virgin statue had turned its head slightly one morning before Mass. But no one spoke out loud what everyone feared, that God himself had turned away. For the next few Sundays, the pews were full, not out of devotion, but out of dread. People stared at the door Padre Pio had refused to cross, wondering if it was really just wood and iron, or something else entirely. And beneath all the questions, beneath all the unease and trembling prayers, a single sentence echoed in everyone's mind. "There's something behind that door that makes the angels weep." Padre Pio was not born with clear vision. He was given it painfully from a young age. His body suffered what his soul could not yet explain. He saw things others couldn't. He heard weeping in rooms that were silent. And at night, he felt the weight of invisible hands pressing against his chest as he prayed. For years, he begged God to take those visions away. But heaven was not silent, only selective. At age 12, while visiting a distant monastery, he fainted upon entering a chapel. When he awoke, he described it in detail. A hidden chamber beneath the altar, lined with ancient scrolls and symbols not meant for Christian eyes. The monks sealed the room and never spoke of it again. But the damage had been done. From that day forward, Padre Pio carried within him a sensitivity most priests feared to even acknowledge. Where others saw stained glass, he saw memory. Where others felt silence, he felt residue, the echo of every prayer and every sin. He didn't speak often of these things, but those close to him noticed patterns. There were homes he would not enter, objects he refused to touch, and once, after receiving a sealed letter from a bishop, he simply handed it back and said, "There is a lie sealed inside." He was always respectful, but never blind. And so, when he stood in front of that village church, the one with the ivy creeping up its facade, with the bell that had not rung right since the war ended, he didn't see a place of worship. He saw something left behind, something that didn't belong to God anymore. And behind those wooden doors, he sensed not evil in the theatrical sense, but profanity cloaked in ritual. Something once holy, used to mask something else. That's why he walked away, not out of fear, but out of reverence. Because even a man of God must know when to let heaven speak through absence. Months passed, and the story of Padre Pio's refusal became less of a scandal and more of a shadow. The church doors remained open, but something had changed. Attendance dropped. Children no longer played near the chapel steps, and even the flowers left at the altar withered faster than before. The air inside was cold, even in summer. Candles burned unevenly. Some nights, the bell rang once with no wind, no hands. Then came the storm. One night, lightning struck the steeple. It didn't fall, but cracked, splitting the wooden cross in two. The bishop declared a divine coincidence, but others weren't so sure. The decision was made. The church would undergo renovations. A team of workers was brought in to restore the foundation and reinforce the altar. And that's when they found it. Beneath the stone floor, below where the priest would stand during Mass, they uncovered a sealed chamber. No markings, no windows, just cold. Inside, they found relics, but not of saints. Burnt pages, symbols carved into wood that did not resemble any Catholic tradition. And in one corner, a small black box, wrapped in a decaying red cloth. It smelled of iron and damp earth. No one dared open it first. But a historian, called in from Rome, examined the items and confirmed. This church had once been built on top of an older structure, one that predated Christianity in the region. And worse, during a time of conflict, the chapel had allegedly been used by those in power to conduct rituals of manipulation, blending holy ceremony with political curses. No one had remembered. No one had spoken of it in decades. But Padre Pio had felt it. He hadn't needed to see the box or touch the floor. He had heard the silent scream. In 01 had remembered. No one had spoken of it in decades. But Padre Pio had felt it. He hadn't needed to see the box or touch the floor. He had heard the silent scream. When the chamber beneath the altar was finally emptied, the church remained closed for 40 days. Not because of danger, but because no one dared enter without praying first. A priest was sent from the Vatican, not just to cleanse the space with holy water, but to listen to the silence that had taken root there. Mass was re-celebrated for the first time under new light. The cross was replaced, the altar rebuilt from stone taken from nearby mountains. And in the first ceremony, after the restoration, not a single person in the pews looked forward. They looked inward. Padre Pio never returned to that village. He never spoke publicly of the moment. But years later, a letter was discovered in the hands of a dying friar, written in Padre Pio's handwriting. It read, "There are places where the voice of God has been silenced by men who wanted to speak louder. When the earth carries that echo, we must not shout over it. We must kneel and listen." That church, once a shell of forgotten rites, is now known not for its darkness, but for the light it reclaimed through truth. And the villagers? They no longer ask why Padre Pio refused to enter. They thank God that he didn't. Because sometimes, a man of faith doesn't save us by performing a miracle in front of the crowd, but by having the courage to walk away in silence when the presence of God is absent. Not all acts of holiness come with incense and applause. Some come with trembling steps, withheld words, and a refusal to pretend that everything sacred still deserves that name. Padre Pio didn't reject the church itself. He rejected what had been hidden beneath it, forgotten by men, but never by heaven. And that's the lesson. When even a house built in God's name begins to echo with pride, deceit, or emptiness, the most faithful thing you can do is stop at the door and listen. Because discernment is not about judgment. It's about knowing when a place carries light, and when only carries memory. So when the angels weep behind closed doors, we must not enter to argue. We must kneel outside and ask why they're crying.